Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. So today is 21st May 2024 and we have few important articles from the Hindu newspaper and we'll try to discuss all those important news articles. And before discussing them, yesterday I've given you one practice question. So the question was with respect to Energy Transition Index is released by which of the following organizations? Now please remember, these energy transition index or any other index, world competitive index and gender inequality index, so those indexes are very important for the exam perspective. Now there is a chance or there is a probability that in question paper you may get such questions. So therefore you have to be prepared about these indexes and reports also. So the question was, Energy Transition Index is released by which of the following organizations? So the correct answer for this question is A, that is World Economic Forum. Now this World Economic Forum releases the Energy Transition Index. Now this Global Energy Transition Index, what it measures? So it actually takes into account 115 countries and it also assesses their readiness to shift to a stable, efficient, accessible and inclusive energy systems. Right now, everyone or every country has been emphasizing on the renewable energies. Now here energy transition actually means a shift from the fossil fuel based economies to a renewable or green fuel based energies. So that is known as the energy transition. Now this energy transition index actually measures 115 countries and their readiness to shift to stable, much more efficient, accessible and inclusive energy systems. Now if you can understand this, it is also one of the goal in the sustainable development goals, that access to this inclusive, accessible, efficient energy. However, this Global Energy Transition Index actually has three key dimensions. What are those dimensions? So the first dimension is economic development and growth dimension, and second dimension is sustainability and energy protection, and then access indicators. Right, so these are three major dimensions based on which the Global Energy Transition Index is prepared. And in fact, this Global Energy Transition Index also considers or takes into account recent developments in the energy environment as well as the growing urgency of addressing the climate change. Right now, the report was released by World Economic Forum. So this is the correct answer for this question. So please try to answer these questions in the comment section so that regularly you'll be part of this initiative. Now another important question that I have given today. So exercise Shakti recently seen in news was held between which of the following countries? Now the options are A, India, France, B, India, USA, C, India and Japan, D, India and Sri Lanka. So please answer this question in the comment section. So exercise Shakti is conducted between which of the following countries? And in fact, it is one of the military exercises between India and the given countries. So please answer this question in the comment section. Now today we'll start this discussion with few important articles, and the first article is with respect to the geopolitical impact of Iran's president's death. So we all knew that recently Iran's president and a foreign minister were killed in an helicopter crash, and this is a very a sad news for Iran, but at the same time it has a lot of geopolitical implications within the region and beyond the region, and even for India also. Now we'll understand what are the major geopolitical implications of this particular event. Now we'll briefly understand this context of this article. So the context is that recent helicopter crash that killed Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi and Iran's Foreign Minister Abdullah. So therefore, it has sent a shock waves throughout the global political landscape. Now, recently, Iran is continuously in news. So continuously in news because Iran has been supporting one of the militant groups Houthi rebels in Yemen. So these Houthi rebels are based out in Yemen. And apart from Houthi rebels, Iran has been indirectly supporting the another militant group Hezbollah also, right? So therefore, this is also a militant group and this is also a militant group, and both are the Shia militant groups, and they have directly extended their support to Hamas for the Palestinian solidarity. And also understand, Iran has recently conducted missile attacks or airstrikes on Israel, so that is also another factor. And apart from that, Iran has also attacked the Pakistani territory, because the militants which were based in Pakistani territory are frequently attacking Iran and Iran establishment. That was the one reason. And apart from that, there were a long-standing conflict between US and Iran. Okay, so US has also imposed sanctions on Iran. So because of all these geopolitical reasons, Iran is in regularly news. So therefore, it has sent shock waves through the global political landscape, so across the political landscape, so with profound implications for the regional stability and even the international relations. And in fact, this particular incident of helicopter crash has occurred amidst the heightened tensions within the West Asia. So why heightened tensions within West Asia? Because of this Hamas and Israeli conflict and other militant groups entering into this conflict, and Iran has been extending support to those militant groups, and even a recent Red Sea crisis. So all these factors can be part of the heightened tensions within the West Asia. So where Israel has been conflict with Hamas in Gaza for last 7 months. Okay, so because of that reason, this Iran and the region has been regularly in news. Now, first and foremost, we'll understand what will be the impact of this particular incident on India-Iran ties, and what will be India's position on this. Now, if you can regularly follow the news that we have discussed recently, India has signed an agreement with Iran with respect to the Chabahar port, right? So Chabahar port is one of the port in Iran, right? So India signed this agreement with Iran in recent times. Okay, so with Iran to operate this particular Chabahar port, and the overall objective of this Chabahar port is to enhance trade with the Central Asia, right? So for example, see, if India wanted to access Central Asia, how can India access Central Asia or Afghanistan? So one way through which India can access Central Asia and Afghanistan is through Pakistan. But now Pakistan actually closed India's access to Afghanistan. Now India has devised a separate or a different route, that is Chabahar. So through Chabahar, we will be connected with the Afghanistan first, and then with the larger Central Asia and the Eastern Europe. So that is why, for the purpose of connectivity and India's presence in Central Asia, so this Chabahar port plays a very, very important role. Okay, so I think you have understood the relevance and importance of the Chabahar port. Now, apart from this particular thing, this Gwadar port is also located very close to this Chabahar port, and this Gwadar port is located in the Pakistan, and Gwadar port is managed by China. So for all these reasons, this Chabahar port for India is very, very important. And in fact, in recent times, the port's development has been delayed because US has imposed sanctions on Iran, and US sanctions on Iran actually delayed the implementation or development of this particular Chabahar port by India. Okay, but however, a recent signing of an agreement between India and Iran with respect to this Chabahar port is a landmark agreement. Okay, so however, there are certain concerns. So both Iran and India have been sharing common concerns with respect to Taliban's Sunni extremism, right? So Taliban is actually a Sunni extremist or militant group. But on the other hand, Iran is a Shia majority group, right? So both India and Iran have a mutual concern with respect to Taliban's Sunni extremism. And apart from that, Pakistan's role in Afghanistan also, right? So because Pakistani deep state has been trying to play a spoil sport in Afghanistan, right? So India's access, or in order to further build on India's existing goodwill in Afghanistan, in order to protect India's establishment, India's infrastructure, India's investments in Afghanistan, so it is very important that we should have a viable route to Afghanistan, and that viable route can be established through Iran. And therefore, India has recognized Iran as a strong regional partner in Afghanistan, because so Iran has facilitated us access to Afghanistan and beyond Afghanistan into the Central Asian region. Now, apart from that, if you can keep everything aside, so Iran itself has devised a policy. That policy is known as Look East strategy. So under President Raisi, Iran actually pursued a Look East strategy. Now, don't confuse with India's Act East policy and Look West policy. We have Look West policy and Act East policy. So in a similar way, Iran also devised a policy called Look West strategy. For example, now this is Iran, and if Iran focused on Iran has launched its Look East policy. So the Look East policy essentially focuses on Afghanistan, Pakistan and India. So therefore, India is a major player in Afghanistan's Look East policy. Okay, so that including Iran being part of the regional connectivity projects, which involves India, majorly the International North-South Transport Corridor. So this International North-South Transport Corridor is very, very important corridor. And apart from that, Chabahar Port, both Chabahar Port and International North-South corridors actually very important for further strengthening connectivity. And therefore, this Look East strategy of Iran actually underscores the strategic view of its relations with India. Okay, so this is how a more fruitful relations being enjoyed by India under the current president, the erstwhile president Ibrahim Raisi. So he was died in an helicopter crash. And apart from that, we also have a good trade relations under this particular president. Now, if you can look into the bilateral trade between India and Iran in 22-23, India's total bilateral trade with Iran valued at 2.33 billion. Okay, so it is a decent amount of trade between India and Iran. So even though it is less than the actual potential between these two countries. So however, in recent years, earlier before 22-23, so there was a decline in trade between India and Iran. Okay, so there was a continuous decline in trade between India and Iran, but in recent years it saw 21.77% increase in this particular financial year. So this has happened. I mean, the trade between India and Iran has substantially increased under the president Ibrahim Raisi when he came to power in 2022. Now, what it has been conveying? It has been conveying that under Ibrahim Raisi's presidency, Iran has significantly improved its ties with India. So even though there are some shortcomings, some bilateral and even diplomatic talks between Iran and this India. Why? Because of US imposing sanctions and Chinese increasing involvement in Iran. So all these factors. Now we'll briefly understand the complications of this particular death of Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi within the region and beyond the region. Now, first and foremost, we'll understand the US perspective. So what will be the perspective of US in this context? So the perspective of US will be US-Iran relations have strained in recent years. Okay, so they have been enjoying the conflictual or strained relations with each other. So why? Because earlier there was a joint comprehensive plan of action. Okay, so it is also known as JCPOA. Now in this joint comprehensive plan of action, P5 plus 1 countries are the member countries. Now here, what are these P5 countries? All permanent Security Council members are P5 countries plus Germany. Now this joint comprehensive plan of action is an agreement with Iran by all these P5 countries plus Germany to prevent Iran possessing or acquiring the nuclear weapons. Right? So Iran will not possess nuclear weapons under this joint comprehensive plan of action, and in return USA withdraw all the sanctions on Iran. So but the problem was, in 2018, when Donald Trump was the president of US, USA withdrawn from the joint comprehensive plan of action and again imposed sanctions on Iran. Now when USA has reimposed sanctions on Iran, so this has created a lot of disaffection within Iran. Okay, so therefore what Iran has done, so Iran has not paid enough respect to this particular joint comprehensive plan of action after USA reimposed sanctions on Iran. Now Iran started to exceed the nuclear limits which are set by this agreement. Okay, so this joint comprehensive plan of action has set a certain limits on Iran that it should not manufacture or possess enriched uranium. Okay, so that enriched uranium can be used for making nuclear weapons. So therefore now Iran has exceeded the nuclear limits which are set by this joint comprehensive plan of action. Now this ongoing conflict between Israel and the Gaza Strip, between Hamas, has further complicated the US-Iran relations. Why? Because now US directly and indirectly supporting Israel in this ongoing conflict, either providing the financial support or any other materialistic support. But on the other hand, Iran is fully supporting the Palestinian cause. So all these factors are actually strained the relations between Iran and this USA. Now what will be the broader implications in the future? Okay, so within the region and beyond the region, so this death of President Raisi would actually lead to a period of uncertainty and potential instability within Iran. So it is generally expected that it could lead to a period of uncertainty and potential instability. Why? Because so who will be the next president and what exactly his policies within the region and beyond the region. Okay, so therefore it has the probability of creating a huge a longer period of uncertainty and potential instability. And apart from that, the leadership transition process will be closely watched by most of the countries which have stakes in Iran. For example, India will closely watch this leadership transition, China, Russia, US, because now understand, under Ibrahim Raisi as Iran's president, Iran has a friendly ties with the Russia. So therefore every country which has stakes in Iran will closely watch this leadership transition process, because it will influence Iran's domestic policies and it will also influence Iran's approach to the international diplomacy. And in fact, the new leadership stands on key issues. There are a lot of key issues. For example, Iran's nuclear program. Iran has its own nuclear program. Iran wanted to acquire the nuclear weapons. And because of that reason, this joint comprehensive plan of action came into effect. Right? So to prevent Iran acquiring nuclear weapons. So, what will be the new leadership's stance on Iran's nuclear program, its relations with Israel, and interactions with US and its relations with Russia. So all these factors have a greater potential of shaping the future outcomes or the future geopolitics within the region and beyond the region as well. And in fact, this particular incident, that was the death of President Raisi, may prompt increased scrutiny and speculation about Iran's internal security and at the same time the political dynamics as well. So any perceived weakness or instability could embolden adversaries or enemies, would further complicate Iran's efforts to navigate this complex web of regional and international relations. Now, this is how the present incident of death of President Raisi would have complications within the region and beyond the region. Now, in this context, so India should maintain its friendly ties with Iran. So India should continue to maintain friendly ties with Iran because it is a very important regional partner for India. And at the same time, India should further engage in continuing these regional connectivity projects, because regional connectivity projects benefits both Iran and India, and at the same time the larger region as well. Okay, so at this point of time, India should carefully watch the situation and then proceed further on this bilateral ties. So the next very important article is with respect to the radical democracy. Now, what exactly is this radical democracy and why it is still relevant today? And that is what we have to understand. Now, if you are a political science and international relations optional student, you very often come across the name of freedom fighter M.N. Roy. So M.N. Roy was the one who proposed this idea of radical democracy. Now, briefly understand context of this particular thing. So what exactly is this radical democracy? So in times of crisis, the need for social reorganization becomes apparent. Now, whenever we have been facing any crisis in existing polity, existing societies, there is a need for social reorganization. Now, in the sense that, for example, whenever the inequalities have been increasing in the society, so that actually makes a note for creating an egalitarian society. So therefore, the social reorganization becomes apparent or important. However, in 19th century, liberal democracy, so once it was celebrated, the liberal democracy was celebrated. Now most of the Western countries follows this liberal democracy. Okay, so liberal democracy essentially rests on the idea of individualism. Okay, so it emphasizes on the idea of individualism. Sorry. Okay, so it essentially rests on the idea of individualism, right? So in 19th century, we have seen that liberal democracies are gaining a lot of prominence in the Western world. However, this particular liberal democracy has led to the exploitation of people under the capitalism. So because of this, Marxism was created. So Karl Marx have come up with a socialism or communism because of, as a reaction to this exploitation under liberal democracy or under capitalism. So therefore, this has faced with the reality. Many sought alternatives to a system which is built on every man for himself. However, the initial enthusiasm for revolution actually faded as communism and fascism led to dictatorship and even the global conflicts. Now understand that we are understanding the context of this radical democracy. Now, before a radical democracy in 19th century, we have the liberal democracy. So liberal democracy has given rise to capitalism in the Western world, but this capitalism actually leads to the exploitation of the workers. So when it is when it has been exploiting the working class, Karl Marx have come up with the idea of socialism. So that was a revolutionary idea, and that was propounded by Karl Marx. Okay, now if you look at these socialist or communist countries such as China and North Korea, they became despotic and they became totalitarian states. And even during the interwar period, fascism was also on rise. Fascism by the examples of fascism from Germany, Italy, and even Japan. So therefore, the communism and fascism led to the dictatorship and even the global conflict, and all these factors have reduced enthusiasm on the revolution or any other revolutionary idea from the existing model of the liberal democracy. However, how this radical democracy was emerged over a period of time, and that is what we have to understand here. Now, understand that Indian freedom fighter M.N. Roy, so his name was Manabendra Roy, and his colleagues actually proposed a solution to that. So what was the solution? The solution was merged freedom with justice, that is scientific humanism. This radical democracy is actually a scientific humanism, merged freedom with the justice, and that is the idea of scientific humanism, or that is the idea of radical democracy. And this philosophy is enriched by scientific advancements, and they actually aimed to reconcile human aspirations with social needs. Now, one thing that you have to understand, the human aspirations are actually in line with the individualistic idea of liberal democracy, and the societal needs actually comes close to the socialism. So there was a reconciliation between the socialism and this liberal democracy can be achieved by M.N. Roy's idea of radical democracy. Okay, so that is the radical democracy. And in fact, the radical humanism or radical democracy actually rejected the idea of totalitarianism. Now, totalitarianism actually very closely associated with the dictatorship, right? So it is very closely associated with the dictatorship, despotism that we have been observing in North Korea, and we have already observed in Germany under Hitler. And in fact, M.N. Roy vehemently opposed this totalitarianism and the regression into the old world theology. So he believed that true freedom could only arise from the rational thought and individual empowerment. Now, when we start thinking rationally about different aspects and at the same time the individual empowerment, so only then we can achieve the true freedom. So not directly through the liberal democracy or not directly through socialism, the human beings can achieve the ultimate highest level of freedom. Rather, the highest level of freedom can be achieved through the rational thought and individual empowerment. And apart from that, the M.N. Roy through radical democracy has further refined or reimagined this democracy idea. So why? Because the traditional liberal democracies, for example, the Western democracies were known as the traditional liberal democracies. So those Western liberal democracies are failed to address the social inequalities. It is true. Now, even in India, we have been observing the highest level of social inequalities in those Western liberal democracies also, such as US or any other European Union countries. There are highest level of social inequalities. So therefore, these Western liberal democracies failed to address these social inequalities, and that has been leading to the rise of a demagoguery and at the same time the political disillusionment also. However, M.N. Roy actually advocated for the radical democracy or radical humanism approach. So this is based on the scientific advancement, or it is a rational idea, and that tries to achieve or try to reconcile human aspirations with the social needs. And in this radical democracy, people will actively take or actively participate in the political processes, and at the same time they also elect their independent candidates which can represent the people. Now, understand the economic justice aspect which is mentioned in this radical democratic idea of M.N. Roy. So along with the social justice, political justice, there is also need for the economic justice, and this has to be addressed. So there is a need for economic restructuring, particularly countries which are having this liberal democratic model, because there are a lot of social inequalities, income inequalities, or wealth inequalities that are being created. And in this context, we need to prioritize human needs over profit. Now, profit motive is not the sole factor for any economy. Rather, we need to take care of, or we need to prioritize the human needs. So therefore, the radical democracy has also provided certain solutions, such as agricultural modernization is one way. Because see, in India, around 50% or more than 50% of the workforce directly and indirectly engaged in the agriculture sector. Now, when we modernize the agriculture sector, when we reap the benefits out of the agriculture sector, so those benefits would actually be accrued to the majority section of the population, and that is how we can bring them out of the poverty. And secondly, the social security and social safety nets can also be provided to the people through the radical democracy. And then equitable industrialization, where the profit motive is not the sole factor, can effectively or actively uplift the masses and can also significantly improve their living standards. And that is what M.N. Roy's radical humanism actually emphasizes on. Now, why we have to follow this radical democracy along with the above mentioned benefits? So this radical democracy or per se democracy as an idea is actually having a lot of civilizational value. Okay, so it relies on recognition of individual freedoms. The fundamental freedoms of the individuals are actually based on this democratic idea. Now, in a democracy, every individual is empowered, because we are directly choosing or indirectly choosing our representatives which rule on us. Because when we don't change the existing economic structure, so that could lead to the economic exploitation. And this economic exploitation of the people, for example, I would give the example of British rule. Now, British rule, we have seen the economic exploitation of the people, and this economic exploitation has further breeds the political tyranny also. And therefore, it is very, very important that we must give priority, we must give importance to the democratic society which is based on justice and freedom. Okay, so a society which increases justice, the ideals like justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, and freedom, so all those things must be emphasized by the political system or the democratic society. And in fact, this vision of radical democracy actually underscores the ethical obligation to uphold the democratic values. So we must uphold these democratic values in the face of political disillusionment and authoritarianism. And therefore, it calls for a society where justice, freedom, and human dignity are paramount or very important. And this is what M.N. Roy's radical humanism is actually talking about. Okay. Now, the next very important article is with respect to the outbreak of the hepatitis E disease. Now we'll briefly understand, so what exactly is this hepatitis? Now, hepatitis is inflammation of the liver. So hepatitis is a condition which is caused by a hepatitis virus, and it is inflammation of the liver. And it can be an acute disease, acute in the sense it is a short-term disease or short-term infection, or it can be a chronic long-term infection. So I hope it is clear what exactly is this hepatitis disease. And there are different wide varieties of hepatitis diseases. Okay, so these different types of hepatitis diseases also have different causes. Now, the viral hepatitis, it is the most common type and caused by one of the several hepatitis virus. For example, hepatitis A, B, C, D, and E. Now, in this image, you can clearly see this is hepatitis A, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, hepatitis D, and E. Now, this hepatitis A is can spread due to the contaminated food, water, or close physical contact with the people. And hepatitis B is transmitted through the contact with direct body fluids or the sexual contact. And hepatitis C, it is contracted when contaminated blood enters the bloodstream of an infected person. And hepatitis D says that can only be obtained when a person is already a hepatitis B patient. Now, this discussion is about hepatitis E. This hepatitis E spreads contaminated food of water and is commonly experienced by frequent travelers. So people who are frequently traveling, they can actually observe this hepatitis E. Now, what is the context? So the context is that World Health Organization recently announced an outbreak of the hepatitis E in Chad. So Chad is an African country. So it is located in the middle of the African continent. Now, what is hepatitis and how many types of hepatitis are there? Now, as I have already told you, that I am again reiterating this, hepatitis is a condition where the liver inflammation is a common character, a common symptom. So it is caused by various factors. So it can be caused by viruses, alcohol, drugs, and even the autoimmune conditions. Now, how this hepatitis disease actually transmits? Now, we have understood how it actually transmits for different types of the hepatitis virus. So the most commonly transmitted type of this hepatitis virus is through fecal oral route from the contaminated water and large waterborne outbreaks, which frequently occur especially in the developing countries. Now, all Latin American countries, African countries, and South Asian countries are the developing countries. And within this hepatitis, a person to person transmission is also a possibility. Okay, so transmission from person to person is also a possible, and most common type, especially in places like Chad, is a viral hepatitis. Okay, so there are 5 main virus types. So we have already understood what are those 5 main virus types, and Chad was caused by, so this recent outbreak in Chad was caused by hepatitis E. So this hepatitis E can range from symptomatic to severely symptomatic. And it is mostly infecting the pregnant woman, individuals with existing liver issues, elderly people, and those with the weakened immune systems. Okay, so these are the main transmission routes of hepatitis E, and apart from that, there are different countries which are vulnerable to hepatitis E and how it can be prevented. So you can go through this. So a vaccine is approved only in China and Pakistan, HEV hepatitis E vaccine. And apart from that, the transfusion of blood screening policy in 8 European countries. So these are some of the factors which could actually reduces the hepatitis E prevalence. The next very important article is with respect to the the melting of glaciers. Okay, so recently one of the last glaciers in Venezuela, that was a South American country or Latin American country, has lost. So earlier Venezuela has around 6 glaciers, but now the last glacier was also lost in Venezuela, particularly because of the climate change. Now, how Venezuela lost its last glacier and why this is matters. Now, Venezuela recently witnessed an environmental or not significant, but an environmental milestone, a negative environmental milestone, marking a grim reality of the climate crisis, because the climate change or the climate crisis, that we can use it synonymously, is responsible for the melting of glaciers. And nations have likely become the Venezuela likely became the first in modern history to lose all its glaciers. So in fact, it has lost all its glaciers. With the recently lost glacier was Humboldt Glacier. So that was classified as an ice field. Okay, so last glacier of Venezuela was Humboldt Glacier, and this event serves as a stark reminder that climate change is not a distant threat but an urgent crisis that has been demanding an immediate action. Now, why these glaciers are actually disappearing in Venezuela? So that is what we have to understand. Now, once Venezuela home to around 6 important glaciers, and these glaciers are actually located in the Andes Mountains of South America, approximately 5,000 meters above the sea level. And Venezuela saw the disappearance of 5 of its glaciers in 2011 itself, and recent one was being Humboldt Glacier. And scientists have made initial estimates that the Humboldt Glacier would endure for another decade, but its rapid melting has defied all the expectations. Now, thanks to climate change, because of climate change, the glaciers are melting at a faster pace, or melting at a much faster pace. Now, what are these glaciers? We'll understand very briefly. So glaciers are actually the massive accumulation of the ice. Okay, so a lot of ice is being accumulated over a period of time, and those are known as glaciers. And in fact, these glaciers are formed over centuries from compacted snow, and they typically develop in regions where annual temperatures hover near the freezing point. So the annual temperatures are in the minus category, and the ice will be accumulated over a period of several centuries, and then the glaciers will be formed. And their sheer mass and gravitational pull actually cause them to flow like rivers, slow rivers. So they actually flow like a slow rivers because of the gravitational pull and sheer mass. So what is the role of global warming or climate change in melting of glaciers? Now, in fact, climate change or global warming have a key role in melting of these glaciers. So in fact, climate change is directly responsible for the melting of glaciers, because now understand, we have been burning fossil fuels, and these fossil fuels releasing harmful greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and these greenhouse gases can effectively trap heat and further increasing the global temperatures. So increasing global temperatures making these glaciers start melt, and then they gradually disappear. That is the problem here. And in fact, the global warming is the primary driver behind the glacier loss, because the global warming is fueled by the accumulation of these greenhouse gases in the atmosphere due to the burning of fossil fuels. Okay, now human activities or anthropogenic activities. So what we are doing, we are burning these fossil fuels since the industrial revolution, and they have a significantly elevated or higher levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and they have been trapping the heat and increasing the temperatures. So they are rising the global temperatures and further accelerating the glacier melting. Now briefly understand the consequences of the glacier melting. So what will be the consequences? Now understand, they are sources of fresh water. So these are sources of fresh water, and in fact around 70% of the global fresh water is found in these glaciers. Now what happens if these glaciers disappear? So then it creates the freshwater crisis. And apart from that, these glaciers also support to some extent a flora and fauna, for example polar bears. So they also play a very important role in Arctic and Antarctic food chain, and this will also gets impacted due to the melting of glaciers. And after melting of glaciers, after food chain, this melting of glaciers also increases the sea level or sea level rise. Now sea level rise would cause the coastal flooding, and coastal flooding would make the water enter into the fertile soils, and that would create the food security issues by making land unsuitable for the cultivation. And even coastal flooding would also lead to people migration of people from the coastal areas, that could create refugee crisis, climate refugee crisis. and even submergence of most important economic centers across the world. So therefore it has a wide variety of concerns. The melting of glaciers has a huge consequences. So therefore we must act on climate change. We must reduce the greenhouse gases emissions into the atmosphere. We should also make a faster or rapid transition into the green economy. So that is one way through which we can slow down the melting of glaciers. Okay, so that's all for today, and thank you so much. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.